Hi, I'm Tom Loucks, Wisconsin Rapids Community Media Coordinator for the City of Wisconsin Rapids. And today my guest, Scott Krug. Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here finally.
All right. Well, we're going to learn a lot about what he's up to and the election, November 6th. So please mark the calendars for November 6th. Scott Krug is the incumbent on the Republican side, and he's running for Wisconsin State Assembly in District 72. So if you're watching here in the Wisconsin Rapids, that's your area.
Sure, absolutely.
And and later on in the question, we'll talk a little bit that if you're not sure where you vote and who you vote for, I should say, we can bring that up as well. But I don't want to do all the talking, and I'm going to turn it right over to Scott, and we're going to start off of him introducing himself, his family, just to get a little bit to know about him. And again, I want to thank you for coming. I haven't had you here for a while.
I know, we haven't connected for a bit, but it's good to be back in the studio and talking about things that are going on. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be able to get in front of people and talk about the issues that are coming up in our elections, get to know each other a little bit more. So yeah, I'm married. We live down in the town of Rome. We're right off the lakes area, and that's why we work so much on water issues in the state legislature, because I live right there. I can see it firsthand every day. I've got 6 kids, 5 teenagers and a 4-year-old, so we're always super busy with everything that's going on, from high school football playoffs right now and volleyball playoffs right now for my daughter, and my 4-year-old is starting soccer the last couple of weeks here, so we're always active and about in the community and everywhere else with activities and events and things like that. So it's an exciting time for us. When election time comes up, I always tell the wife and kids it's the no fun summer, because we're always doing parades and door knocking and things like that. So vacation time gets to be every other year after a while, but they get used to it and they like it. And without their support, honestly, Tom, I wouldn't be doing this. I mean, that's just how it works, is if you don't have a good support structure around you that's going to allow you to be, gone to Madison on certain days, or, drag everybody to a parade on the 4th of July when they'd rather be celebrating. If it wasn't for them, I absolutely wouldn't be anywhere near, being able to do this for a 5th term. So it's really, really blessed.
Well, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and glad you have a family that supports you. Yeah. It's hard nowadays in balancing that life and play and work.
Well, right. That's why we try to keep them all involved in it all at the same time, so we can spend time together somehow. So otherwise, it's crazy.
All righty. Well, we have 14 questions for Scott, and I'm going to lead it off right now talking about District 72. Originally, I mentioned right at the beginning of this program. And I want to know a little bit from you, geographically speaking, talk to the voters about it. You're in District 72. What is that? It's Wisconsin Rapids. I know there's a little bit of difference in the districting. Can you just explain on your side for people that were looking for your name on the ballot?
Yeah, the 72nd District is a pretty diverse district. It stretches the 4 counties of Wood, Portage, Adams, and Waushara. Not all the counties. I mean, there's a little bit of a portion of each. So, for example, we're here southeast Wood County, so we've got the Wisconsin Rapids area, Port Edwards, Burin, Saratoga. Stretches down into Adams County through the town of Rome, all the way down through Big Flats and down into just north of Friendship, where it cuts off. You take it Highway J all the way across over into Waushara County, stretch it out through Hancock, Coloma, Watoma. Right when you get past Watoma is kind of the eastern edge of it. Then you swing back up the area into Almond and Bancroft and Portage County back to Rapids. So that's kind of the detour that you would take, is that 4-county route. So it's about 57,000 people that it represents.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge area. So we're out knocking on doors. We've got to hit about 13,000 doors out of 57,000 people. Okay. So it's diverse and it's a big area.
That's a lot.
It's a huge manufacturing, blue collar area on the western side. You cross the interstate and it turns into a massive agricultural district, probably one of the biggest ag districts in the state of Wisconsin, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a good diversity.
Yeah. I mean, every issue that we talk about in the state assembly at some point really touches the 72nd. And that's the nice thing about this district being so diverse, is that when the issues come up, I've got firsthand knowledge and experience with people in district who can kind of help and guide and lead and give some input.
All right. Well, let's talk about schools. It's always a topic. It comes up in campaigning. It comes up beyond campaigning. We all talk about it. We all have kids. Let's talk about, do you feel the local schools here in the area are providing a good education for our children? If so, yes, or if so, no. I guess what does someone in your kind of position, you're the incumbent, what would they do to help if needed? I'm not sure I'll hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I can't say enough about our local schools. I mean, I'm super thrilled that our schools have some of the highest quality education in the state of Wisconsin, from test scores to graduation rates and beyond. You're not gonna top our schools here in central Wisconsin, which makes it even more exciting for me that we made a historic investment into K through 12 this legislative session with $630 million plus investment into our classrooms. If you talk an average classroom size of about 20 kids, the $200 per pupil we added this session, and the $200 first year, and another $400 the second year, an average class of 20 kids, that's almost $12,000 investment into a classroom. So that's something that I think is pretty exciting for people to understand, as we've made these gigantic investments to even double down on how good our education is, and to improve the quality of our workforce in education, make sure our teachers are trained and skilled, make sure that they have the idea that we're going to support them if they want to work in rural districts, make sure that we're drawing them into rural Wisconsin. Because when we talk about education, there's really two different ways to talk about it. We have urban and we have rural. And we always talk about how big schools in some of the bigger cities of the state aren't doing as great, but our rural schools are amazing. So the investments we make just make them even better.
All right. Well, thank you for that information. Let's move on to roads. That's another one that we all hear, well, when we drive them every day around the Wood County area, as well as the other counties, because you mentioned earlier, there's a crossover in there. So we can't just talk about Wood County, which we're in at this point, because that's a seat for the city of Wisconsin, or Wisconsin Rapids. Are they in poor shape? Are they not? What's true about it? If so, should the state provide funds for road replacements?
Yeah, and this is where Governor Walker and I have kind of butted heads a little bit on where we're going to go with transportation. It's not much unlike education, where we're talking about urban versus rural. That's the same thing with transportation. The focus in our transportation budgets the last few years have been, the super mega projects, and trying to make sure those get done. We're talking billion-dollar price tags on some of those major arteries in southeast Wisconsin. Thankfully, those are getting done. They're going to be off of our budget books pretty soon, so we can start investing more in maintenance of our local roads. For example, I think we've been really successful here locally to get road projects going. So if you've driven Highway 13 in the last 4 months, you know exactly how big an investment the state's making here in central Wisconsin. That's a 3.5 mile stretch of road that we're spending about $4 million on improving. So I'm excited that we've been able to fight for our local projects here. When you look at the condition of the roads district-wide, I think we're in a pretty good shape compared to the rest of the state. And I think the reason that is because it takes really effective legislators, and we have 7 legislators who represent Wood County, from senators to representatives. Through that process, I think we've all been able to advocate for the projects of our county and make sure that it's taken care of. So it's definitely room for improvement. There is in everything. And I think we've done a pretty big job in trying to get those mega projects out of the way so we can start taking those dollars back into maintenance.
All right. Well, Foxicon going on right now down there. And we've heard it all over the news. And it's a big development here in our state. Let me hear from your side. Are you in favor or not in favor of it?
Well, I voted for the Foxconn incentive deal. It's one of the best votes I've ever taken. From the time I got elected to now, and one of the biggest things we hear from people in my district are, I wish there were jobs, I wish there were opportunities, I wish there was something my kids could look forward to in the state, I wish my grandkids were closer. When we're talking about Foxconn, we're talking not just jobs, we're talking about a new industry. And not just, industry and technology and manufacturing, but advanced high-tech manufacturing, cutting edge. 13,000 jobs. When we talk about how good our engineering schools in the state of Wisconsin are, we had to add buildings to Platteville and to Green Bay so we could educate more engineers in the state of Wisconsin. Those are jobs that kids from central Wisconsin could take advantage of. Those are families from Wisconsin who can stay intact. Those are grandkids who can be closer to grandpa and grandma during Christmas for decades to come. I can't imagine why people would think this is a bad deal, because Foxconn isn't an automatic here's your money type of deal. It's pay as you go. It's pay as you grow. So as Foxconn adds jobs and Foxconn adds buildings and adds dollars into our economy, we'll help offset that with some incentive. But people say Foxconn will break their deal, or they'll break a promise, or they'll not build. First of all, they're building already. The campus is becoming massive already. They're hiring already. They have 1,000 employees hired already. So they're coming. They're doing what they promised. And if they don't get 1 red cent from the taxpayer of the state of Wisconsin. That's the most amazing part of the deal, and that's why I think it's probably one of the best things that we could have voted on last session.
All right. So they're currently building now, you say?
Yeah, campus is being built.
What are we
right
looking
now.
at timeline? I'm just, I know we're kind of a little tangent, but I'm just curious if you would know the
fine.
timeline of when that's going to maybe open.
Yeah, I think the main campus is looking at 2020 grand opening and big operations. But between the incentives that we've provided them, they've decided to go beyond that incentive plan to purchase buildings in downtown Milwaukee, Eau Claire, Green Bay. They're making investments in healthcare in Wisconsin. They're making investments in ginseng in north central Wisconsin. So besides just that actual campus that'll open, in 2020 and 2021, there's Foxconn everywhere in the state of Wisconsin coming soon.
So you refer to it as a campus? Is that how you
Yeah,
call it?
it's not just going to be one gigantic building in the middle of Racine. There's probably 100 or so buildings that'll be on this mega campus that they have out there. So different areas. So it'll look like a campus with individual buildings and
it'll all be new.
All brand new. I mean that's $10 billion of investment that we're talking about here. It's massive amount.
But you're saying, all the incentives that was granted by the state and Scott Walker's, you say that they do not get those until they would meet their the qualifications that you guys had put on them, right?
The contract's got delineated markers. If you have this many jobs, here's your incentive. If you put this much money into construction, here's your incentive. So it's not like we're just writing them a blank check saying, okay, go do this. We're saying after you do this, here's some help to keep going even further beyond. So that's what I think people don't understand about the Foxconn deal, is that it gets misconstrued and not conveyed to people the way that it actually is constructed. We've learned through the years when it came to big public projects like that with the Miller Park or the Buck Stadium or things like that we don't want to just give money away. We want to have them have some skin in the game.
All right. Well, that was good information. If you're just joining us here today, I'm sitting here with Scott Krug. He's the incumbent for the 72nd Assembly. Election, November 6th. Mark it on your calendars. Coming up pretty quickly. I believe it's October 16th already. We're taping this ahead. And you guys will be able to see this not only on television, YouTube, Facebook, his campaign page, his opponent's campaign page. We're putting out wherever we can to educate the voters. I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm Tom Loucks, City Wisconsin Rapids Multimedia Coordinator. And we're going to move on to number 6 already. 15 of these questions. We're going through them pretty quick, but that's good. And we're only 15 minutes in. But let's talk about this, Scott. Healthcare. It's on everybody's mind. Sure. I think back 20 years ago, it wasn't like this. More than 20 years ago, I was in college, but it's skyrocketed. What can the state do? Does the state need to be involved? I'm saying, does the state? Some people don't say it's the state. Tell me what you would do, being in the 72nd. You're there now. What would you do or would not do?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand that the state wants to be involved. The state wants to make sure that our programs for healthcare meet the needs of our residents of the state of Wisconsin. Unfortunately, Washington doesn't let us do that as much as we'd like to. So that's the biggest challenge we have, is trying to coordinate the programs we think fit for our residents into what Washington tells us we can and can't do. So for example, with the Affordable Care Act in place and not going anywhere anytime soon from what I can understand in Washington, we made a gigantic investment, $200 million into our healthcare system from the state of Wisconsin to drive those ACA rates down for the first time ever. So we're looking next year on an average 4.2% decrease in healthcare costs for people on the affordable care plans that Washington has made available to us. That's a big deal. I mean, when you talk about healthcare rates rising, historically for the last 2 decades, almost nonstop, faster than property taxes under Governor Doyle. I mean, come on. You have to really look at what we're doing in healthcare to say, okay, we're protecting people with pre-existing conditions. And while we're doing that, we're making sure that your rates are going down for the first time in decades. That's where the state involvement really makes a big dent in people's pocketbooks to say, okay, we want to protect your dollars, but we also want to give you the coverage. Locally, we're very blessed. We've got Aspirus, we've got Gunderson and Adams, we've got St. Joe's and Ministry up in Marshfield and Stevens Point. Our healthcare infrastructure, what I call it here, is solid. When Aspirus is talking about multi-million-dollar expansion projects, adding their behavioral medicine center, behavioral health center the last couple of weeks here, have mental health issues be able to take care of locally here instead of driving to Wausau or Weston or wherever else. I think here with the local companies that we have, we're super blessed in central Wisconsin to have the ability to find providers that we need for the care that we want. That's a luxury that a lot of people around the state of Wisconsin just don't have right now.
Yeah, right in the middle and a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
Especially here in Rapids. We got Aspirus. And we actually have 2 big buildings here.
Yeah, right. I mean, the clinic and now Aspirus with the Riverview Hospital and everything that they're doing to revamp that. I mean, it's an exciting time, and with I think they said $25 million more of investment coming on top of that.
Yeah, a lot of neat things happening in this area. So.
And that's really cool. It's the first time. I grew up in Wisconsin Rapids. You see all the things that happened here in the 80s and early 90s, and the decline that had happened over the years, and all the major investments and all the major projects that the state's been able to help the city be able to accomplish. We're on the tip of the iceberg of some really big things here, not just in healthcare, but everywhere else.
All right. Let's talk about cost of living. That's kind of tied in a little bit here to what we were just talking about. It's always going up. Is there anything that the state can do to help with this?
Yeah, I think the best thing the state can do is keep providing worker education dollars, because when you talk cost of living increase, the only thing that offsets that is higher wages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that helps higher wages get accomplished for a worker is when there's job opportunities, and when employers can't find employees, wages go up. So for example, this morning we went on the Job Center of Wisconsin website and saw that there are over 100,000 jobs available just on the Job Center of Wisconsin website alone, which tells me employers are having a hard time finding people to fill those positions, which tells me that an employee who's got a good work set, a good work skill, some dependability and some reliability, when they go into the workforce, they're not going to make the wage they made 5 years ago. They're going to make the wage that the employer needs to pay them now. So that offsets cost of living. So that's the biggest thing we can do, is make sure that those employees, those potential employees, have the skills they need for the 21st century workforce. That'll offset any problems that we could face with any cost of living adjustments that need to be made. With wages going up 7% in the last year or so, that offsets the 2% cost of inflation increase. So, that basic economic principle of a job and the dignity of work, that plays a lot into that.
Okay, and the schools, which we talked about earlier, an important part of making this happen.
Sure, absolutely. That's where that giant historic investment that we made really pays off, is to educating people into getting into work fields that exist locally, and making sure that they can stay local and add to our economy while making a good family supporting wage. I mean, those are goals that not only Republicans have, but those are goals that even the Democrats have. Those are things that we share that vision on, to make sure that we improve the areas that we represent. Those are areas of common ground. Those are things that make common sense, and those are the things we agree on in the legislature, which is sometimes a rare thing to accomplish. So
yeah, it's changed over the years.
Sure.
Well, maybe it's always been that, but I guess maybe with all the media that's out
it's
there,
a little more pronounced with social media nowadays.
Yeah,
sure.
Maybe we always say this stuff's probably been going on for years, and probably has a lot of it. So
yeah, I think the really exciting part though is that I think 90% of the bills we passed this session were bipartisan, and the last session was like 92%. So yeah, you'll hear about how there's this acrimony and how we don't like each other. I think, when it comes down to Republican versus Democrat, I think the biggest battles I fight in the legislature always come back to that urban versus rural.
Okay.
Where there's rural Republican legislators, we don't always agree with urban, Republican legislators.
Okay. Big difference, and you don't really hear that.
Right.
Urban versus right in town.
Urban versus rural is probably the biggest fight we have.
Urban versus rural. Oh, that's a good thing to know. All right. Well, that leads us right into the question of partisan politics. And the reason I brought this up is I think we asked it, and I was not the host, is the sheriff. Is why is that the way it is?
Oh, yeah, right.
Because you're a sheriff, it's law. It's either there's no
Republican Democrat.
Yeah, but it is, and it's and we asked that question to both candidates, Becker and
Hiller.
Yep. And it was interesting. So I guess I want to hear you already mentioned a bit already about it. You just want to elaborate a little more about the
I think that's the favorite thing I like to do is when I do my radio show with Carl Hilke the first Friday every month. We always call those more tutorials than we call them anything else, because kind of I love giving people a primer on how politics works and how government comes together, because people will say, well, why would you do this? well, if I do this, I know I can get this, this, and this. Because politics is a strange game, right? It's not only, the differences between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, which there are differences, but also with 99 individual legislators and a 63-person caucus that I go into, I've got to figure out how to get those individuals who are different than me as a Republican. We're all different Republicans. There's no singular type of definition for what a Republican is. So I think those R's and those D's don't mean as much as as people think they do.
Okay.
So I'll try to figure out more so, how to build personal relationships with people, whether they're Republicans or whether they're Democrats.
Sure.
You don't buy into the party line all the time. I've voted against the state budget before. I've voted against plenty of bills that don't make sense for my local needs and for my local constituents.
Okay.
That's what the job is to represent your constituents, not represent a party. But when it comes to election time, you got to pick a party.
Right.
You try to find the party that you best fit into. Whether it's for me, the biggest thing about being a Republican is I think that we need to have a more limited government. That's one of the keystones that I build my Republicanism off of, is that the government doesn't always need to be the first answer, but it can always be part of the answer.
Okay.
I don't always prescribe to everything R is R and everything D is D. Every bill that I've passed this last session that got signed into law either had a Democrat co-sponsor or Democrat votes. So I like to dabble across the other side of the aisle to make sure that not only my needs are being met for my district, but I've got a neighboring district in Stevens Point, with Katrina Shanklin represents. So we, from time to time, we'll work together on bills because we both represent Portage County. So, the sexually violent person bill is a good example from last session, where they had judges sending people who were on release from Chapter 51 mental holds into her community because it was illegal and just made it a dumping ground. We work together to try to make sure that doesn't happen. So, I think it's overpronounced sometimes of R versus D. And as long as you're doing the job that your constituents send you to do, I think the R means a little bit less.
Yep.
And the R for me stands more for results than Republican. So.
All right. Well, that's good information. I just neutral here, guys. I have to be. And that's part of what community media is to provide that information on both sides.
Right.
And I'm glad I can provide that for you and your opponent and bring it to you guys here and let you make that decision. The people of our state can make those decisions. That's all part of why we live in America.
Yeah, you look at ballot results over the last couple decades in Wisconsin. We're not a red state. We're not a blue state. Back when I first ran, I know I had people with yard signs for Barack Obama that had Scott Krug signs. It happens. People vote on the person in this area more than the party, which is why we knock on tens of thousands of doors, just so we can introduce ourselves and say hi to everybody. So.
And you don't know if they're Democrat or Republican. All these, you might can figure it out, but not always. They can move, right?
After a few years, you know where you've been and you know who's leaning a certain way. But the interesting nature about our area right now is with so many people coming in right now. There are whole entire subdivisions in Grand Rapids this session that didn't exist last time I was around.
Oh, really? Some new development over there.
We were out on Prairie Ridge a couple days ago knocking on doors, and my GPS map told me to go this way, but there's a whole new this way.
Really?
And it's just exciting to see all this new addition and all these new people coming in and to meet them all.
Right.
And, as people leave and move out of the area or move away to somewhere else and new people are coming in, you could knock on 13,000 doors every session that we do and have half of them still be new and never have seen somebody before. And that's the biggest response we get from people when we knock on the door. Nobody's ever knocked on my door before. Well, I don't know why. That's something that's what the job is to make sure we're out knocking on doors and talking to people and getting to meet them. So we'll wear out a few pairs of shoes every few months to make sure we can do that. Yeah, and then you get your volunteers to help you too. I bet it's not. You gotta have fun with people. You can't do it all yourself. Yeah, there's always some people that'll come up and help out for a little bit, but
But you're out there
6 hours a day, 6 days a week, trying to make sure we can meet everybody we can.
That's all you can do. Yeah. So we were just talking about, you had a United Way campaign meeting today, talking about Catalyst, and which is no longer Catalyst, different name.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
20 new jobs, I heard, or 25 new jobs.
Well, I try not to focus on the job number. I mean, it is great because we're finally adding paper company jobs to it,
Yeah,
which
you
is
don't
great.
do that.
But when you talk about $189 million of investment from a company that just came to our area.
Yeah. 9 Dragons, right?
9 Dragons.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they call themselves ND just to make sure that people aren't leery about the name.
Yeah, okay.
But that $189 million investment for a company who just located here tells me that they see something, that they know that there's something good about this area that can help them understand that a $200 million investment is going to make them some money. Because you don't invest $200 million just to invest $200 million.
Nope.
So I think they're really expecting some big things in Barron, and just the 27 jobs that they're talking about adding right now doesn't take into account all the construction jobs from adding that new pulping division they're putting out there. It doesn't take into account the future capabilities of the space they have in the Barron mill. We've talked with ND, and I think there's a possibility for even more expansion inside the existing mill. And that really puts pressure on our other paper companies in the area to pay attention, to say, okay, well, ND is doing this. What is Versa looking to do? What is Domtar looking at doing? Are we falling behind them, or do we need to make those investments too? So I think we'll see some bigger things from the paper industry in the state of Wisconsin.
A little competition.
Yeah, we just saw that Green Bay Packaging is building the first new paper mill in the state in decades.
Wow.
$500 million new mill. We just saw Kimberly-Clark go through this, transition where they're talking about leaving the state for a bit, and then we, give them an incentive package to say, okay, we want you to stick around. So I think, as we do that Kimberly-Clark incentive deal, I think in the end we're going to see a bigger bump for paper companies all across the state of Wisconsin instead of just one paper company getting an incentive. The industry is changing massively. New products and new ideas and innovation and creativity, and I think it's just, people that are kind of revolting against plastic. So the death of plastic is going to be the rebirth of paper. I mean, it's just
maybe.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
What's old is new again. What's new again can be, but it's just reinvented in a different model. Yeah. So, well, that's cool. Well, let's move on to marijuana. That's another piece that's been talked about. Legalizing really more for health purposes, but I'm just going to put what's your position on it both ways, legalizing it.
Sure. Recreational, I'm going to say absolutely to the camera right now that recreational marijuana is not on the radar for the state of Wisconsin. I think to help people understand that in that situation, we're talking about a mind-altering substance, right? So I've been a leader on CBD oil for the last 6 years in the state of Wisconsin, which is a derivative of the marijuana plant, which is really, targeted that chemical to medicinal purposes for people with, neurological disorders and whatever disorders that, the CBD would react with really well. I think it's important that we expand on our ability for the CBD oil, which we did in the hemp bill to make it able to be produced and sold in the state of Wisconsin, which it had never been before. I want to make sure that if we're going to be talking about a medical marijuana bill, which I think we'll see again this session, I want to make sure that it's not a system that was like a runaway system in California, where anybody can just say, "Oh, I need it. I got a doctor's card because I got a sore back," or those smaller things. I want to make sure it's targeted for the individuals who absolutely need it. Make sure the doctors are making those decisions with the patients, that we allow them to have that conversation. Because as a limited government type of guy, I want government out of the decisions of healthcare. If a doctor and a patient can make that decision, and it makes sense medicinally, I think we should look at being able to do that. But recreationally, I don't think we'll ever get there, and I hope we don't even have that conversation, because I don't want the opportunity for more mind-altering substances to be out in front of the general public where kids can get a handle on them. It's not going to be something that I'll ever talk about in the state of Wisconsin.
All right. Let's move on to agriculture. We touched base with it earlier a little bit when we were talking about some jobs and rural versus urban as well, and Republicans. How do you feel agriculture is going on in our state, and maybe right in your district?
Well, I'll tell you right now, in my district, it's tough. I've got probably the third biggest area of the state of Wisconsin for an agricultural district, per dollar. My area, for the most part, is potatoes, beans, corn, peas, carrots, all the vegetables that we're talking about. And it's super tough right now because my guys can't get out and harvest right now. It's so wet. There's so much water out there. And something in the sands is just, in the central sands to have water standing, it's not easy.
Yeah.
That water soaks in pretty quick. So my farmers are having a tough time right now trying to get their crops out of the ground before they rot.
Yeah, right.
So Senator Heston and I just sent a letter to the USDA to help expand the crop insurance program for these guys later into the year. Make sure that they're not having catastrophic losses.
Mm-hmm.
On the dairy side of the state of Wisconsin, everybody knows that dairy's having a super hard time as well. Dairy farms are closing more than they're opening in the state of Wisconsin. And I think it's one of the reasons that we work so hard on trying to find a balance between the byproducts of dairy in the state of Wisconsin and protecting our environment. I want to make sure, as I've said a couple times in other interviews, I want to make sure Wisconsin maintains its dairy state status. At the same time, I don't want us to put in operations that are going to cause catastrophic environmental problems. So I've worked really hard this session on finding companies that have new technologies, bringing them to the forefront to say, what can you do to treat some of the runoff issues that we're talking about? What can you do with excess manure? How can you treat it? How can you process it? How can you make it something more valuable and producible for profit for other companies to use and sell? So I think this session we're going to see a major incentive for dairy farmers to go into new technologies to make sure that they're not polluting our groundwater, not causing more runoff issues for blue-green algae into too much phosphorus into our lakes. But it's a really big key emphasis for me is that we make sure that we're not chasing dairy farmers out of our state. It's an $88 billion industry. It's the backbone of the state of Wisconsin. We can't ignore it. We can't cut it out completely. There are thousands and thousands of people who depend on industry, the dairy industry, and other, ag-related industry in the state of Wisconsin. And I think it's close to 10,000 jobs in my district alone. So we need to make sure that we're protecting the ag industry, but we also need to make sure we're balancing byproducts and issues that come along with it.
All right. Well, that leads right into, tariffs.
Sure.
We hear about that on soybeans.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a lot of soybeans in this area.
Yeah, a lot of soybeans.
There is, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess I just want to hear your stance on what President has done. We've heard in the news. Is that all true? You just don't know, but I guess I just want to hear what you feel about tariffs that are going on, definitely the agriculture area.
Yeah, I think for me, having one of the biggest ag districts in the state, I think I would be hearing about it a lot more if people had gigantic concerns about it. I'll hear from a few farmers every so often who'll say, it's really affecting my bottom line right now, but they understand that this, what I like to call the short-term pain for long-term gain approach, something that's going to benefit them later into the future. So I think they're trying to weather the storm, so to speak, to make sure that, as if tariffs are causing problems right now in their markets, that they understand that there's a benefit coming. I'd rather see more fair trade practices, internationally. When you have massive trade deficits with countries, they take advantage of the situation and exploit it even more because they know that they have you in their pocket and can get away with some things. I think the ability to stay tough on those has produced a really big win for our dairy industry lately with the new agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. So to give the president some credit to try to help our dairy farmers and get a good deal to increase our dairy exports to Canada and give our producers a chance to grow and become bigger and better. So I think we're on the precipice of some solutions with those trade deals coming to conclusions. The president's just got to figure out a way to work with the Chinese on getting that one done. I think we'll be through the woods here.
Yeah. Well, our company here is from China, right? We're talking about Nine Dragons, right?
Sure. I mean, when you talk about the impact of the Chinese and other governments in our local district, we've got Domtar is a Canadian company. Urco is a Canadian company. You've got Nine Dragons from Hong Kong. You've got so many different companies around the district that I represent that are international companies. So we've got a really good international delegation, and I sit on a new committee at the state level that does international trade and commerce. So we sit on that committee as well, and we work through some of these issues with our partners from other countries who are already here. It's a major investment from all over the world into our district.
All right, well, let's switch gears. About pollution. Is it a big deal in the state of Wisconsin?
I think it is in some facets. I think the EPA does a great job in regulating air and water, but I'd like to see us have some more control at the state level from the EPA to make sure that we can do some things that we don't necessarily need their permission for all the time. So, for example, with all the phosphorus that gets into Lake Petenwell, turns into blue-green algae that you can almost walk across the points. We wrote a bill in 2013 that would allow phosphorus input producers to exchange credits within the watershed. So if they couldn't get their phosphorus load down, they would buy credits from other people who have some capability to absorb some of that cost. So in the end, those big producers would be reducing phosphorus load within an entire watershed instead of just from their own point source. But the federal government needed to give us a waiver to be able to do it. And it's taken 4 years. And we finally did get a waiver to do our phosphorus trading system in the state of Wisconsin. So if the EPA and the federal government would let us be a little more creative, a little more flexible on some of the controls and ideas that we've had, I think we'd be further down the road in protecting our lakes and rivers and bodies of water. But it's not to say that we're not making huge investments and huge headway into this. I sat down with the DNR probably back in, had to be April now. We were talking about the total maximum daily load study we did for the Wisconsin River system in Lake Petenwell and Castle Rock. We were able to fund some ideas for reducing phosphorus. We did the phosphorus trading system. DNR sat at my table in April and told me, hey, the things we're doing, we'll make sure within the next 5 to 10 years that Lake Petenwell won't have these issues in the summer anymore. My jaw kind of dropped. I figured we're talking a 20 to 30 to 40 year process where I'm going to see this every summer the rest of my life. Maybe my kids would see it better later, but DNR says, if we put in the work, we do the things we need to do, 5 to 10 years from now, you're not going to see blue-green algae anymore. So after decades and decades and decades of this issue being, first and forefront for me, especially down in Rome, we're going to see a solution finally, and that's the exciting part about any pollution issues we're talking about. When it comes to groundwater, surface water, runoff, phosphorus, all those types of water issues. That's been my wheelhouse in the legislature the last 8 years. It wasn't what I went to Madison for, but it's what I've become good at to understand the issue. So we're going to make sure we keep combating that absolutely as much as possible.
How things change.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay the same all the time, so you gotta work with what's there and what's changing. Our world changes every day.
Yeah.
You can't keep the same stuff all the time. But let's talk about minimum wage.
Sure.
What is it right now? Still 7 something? I don't even know.
I think $7.25.
So should it go up or not? I noticed even places like McDonald's and are already offering incentives and offering a higher wage.
That's what I was going to say. Is if you look at the places even here in Rapids, the Walgreens or the McDonald's, the places that people would have typically thought were minimum wage jobs. I think the employers of the area have kind of thrown out this idea of $7.25 an hour, and they need employees so bad right now, like we talked about earlier, is that employees are not going to be on your payroll for $7.25 an hour. They're going to look somewhere else. Nobody can afford to work there at $7.25 an hour. And employers know this, so McDonald's is paying $10 an hour to start. McDonald's is doing a $250 sign-on bonus to come work there. So minimum wage becomes kind of a moot point in a super growing, big, booming economy, because no employer in their right mind is even going to think about trying to pay somebody the minimum wage anymore. So I think
getting one.
Right. I think the free market obviously has made this a solution. $10 an hour at Walgreens, or drive a shuttle bus down to Stanton Valley and you're making $14 an hour. I mean, I think the free market has blown way past this idea of minimum wage.
All right. Let's talk about workforce education. We did bring that up. It's important. I believe that you had said to get education in the area to provide for these jobs. Is it educated enough, or do we have to do more?
Yeah, there's always more, right? I mean, everything you do is there's always got to be more. The book of ideas gets fuller because you can't get them all done right away, type of thing. I think the state of Wisconsin's done a really good job with their Fast Forward program, investing tens of millions of dollars every state budget into training existing employees in the company to up their skills so they can take promotions, so new entry level people can come in. We've been as creative as we possibly can be, even our K through 12 system, with adding fab labs, these advanced manufacturing centers within our local schools, getting kids to understand more of the STEM concepts and and learning some job skills before they get into the tech college system. So by the time they get to the tech and employers with the customized programs, so these kids have an idea of what's out there. I think workforce-wise here locally, the Chamber of Commerce does an amazing job with our heavy metal bus tours and expanding those tours into ag and information technology and all the sectors we have here to expose our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders into what we're looking at as their future here in central Wisconsin. One of the things I'm most excited about, though, is that one of the proposals Governor Walker came out with already for the next state budget is to expand our state apprenticeship programs into even earlier years, 6th, 7th grade. So we can help people at, when they're 13, 14-year-old, trying to help them understand that you can focus in on a career opportunity now and start taking educational opportunities to put you towards that ultimate goal. Instead of waiting to college to figure out what you want to do, like when we were younger, that was it. You go to college and you go for 2 years and then you figure out what you want to do. We got to get away from that model because the workforce is ultra competitive. So if you're not ready for it by the time you graduate high school, I don't know if college is going to prepare you as quick as it used to. So we've got to start a lot earlier, make sure the kids know what they want to do by the time they get to college. We've made it so easy for kids to graduate college in less than 4 years or exactly at 4 years. When back in our day when we were talking about going to college, some kids were talking about, I'm a 6th-year senior, I've kind of got a few credits to get the. We can't wait anymore. The workforce demands people now, so we've got to get kids through our college system in 3 to 4 years. We've got to make sure they can earn credits in high school. These are all the things we've been doing, budget after budget, to make sure that it's absolutely as easy as humanly possible to achieve any educational opportunity you want, so you can have the job you want when you're done.
And you want to get out to the polls at that time. Also, there's early voting too right now, so you can do that if you're watching. So please do that as well. I believe they call it early voting.
Yeah, early voting. Yeah.
Early voting. So you don't really have to wait nowadays, so you can get out there. But the big one is takes place, and if you need to, there's 2 polling places right here in the city. If you're watching us beyond the city, you can look that up or call your village or town, and they'll gladly help you and tell you where to go, or visit their websites. They have a lot of information. Almost every one of us have Facebook pages. If you're in the city here, right here in this building, Centralia Center is where our west side, and the other one is Crossview, I believe. It's a church over there, over by Cops. So, we're going to finalize on this last question for Scott, our guest here, to answer, and he's going to talk to you guys right to the camera, and I'm going to sign off. And again, thank you for joining us here on our Wisconsin Rapids Community Media Center station, and that we can provide this information. And I thank Scott for coming as well. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Scott, here. And I want you to tell the voters why they should vote for you. And I'm going to turn the camera right over to you, and go ahead.
Good. Thanks again for this, Tom, and giving us an opportunity to talk to folks. First of all, I want people to understand that all the input you can possibly want to give is free for you to do. Pick up a phone, shoot me an email. My personal cell phone number has always been available. 715-459-2267. I'm excited to take ideas and excited to get things done in Madison. And I think that's why I'm running for re-election. That's why I think I'd like you to vote for me, is that results matter. That's something I've really pinned my legislative career on, is making sure that I'm not just there in Madison just to be there, but that we're getting something done. So you look at the results from the last few years, from protecting those jobs at Skyward and adding 1,000 more jobs, to helping to pass the TIF bill and writing the TIF bill for Sand Valley so they could be in place 5 years earlier than planned. To make sure that we've got the infrastructure improvement available from our new airport investments and our Highway 13 investments, and making sure that our paper industry is adding jobs and that our economy in central Wisconsin is good and booming, and taking care of the needs of the folks here. We're also working really hard to protect our healthcare needs, to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered, to make sure that our local providers are providing services that matter to people in central Wisconsin. As a father of 6, I said 5, wow. I forget how many kids I have sometimes. As a father of 6, I think it's just important that we understand that our educational system is absolutely going to be the top priority for the state of Wisconsin, year in and year out. With our historic investments we made last session, there's plenty more to do. Our schools rurally are still having some struggles. We want to make sure we provide them not only dollars to operate, but that we're providing mental health services to our schools that are struggling with that right now. I talk to my administrators all the time, and they're telling me about second-tier issues that they're having now, and that's a good thing that we've solved some of the first problems and can move on to the next. That's why I think it's super important for you to have a super effective legislator who can deal with common sense and not always play the party politics, not afraid to vote against some things that don't make sense. I'm that guy. I want to be that guy again for another 2 years. I appreciate the support you've given me the last 2 years, and I ask for your vote November 6th. Thank you.